We like to believe that the line between good and evil is a wall, a thick, impenetrable barrier of stone and iron that separates our civilized lives from the monsters lurking in the periphery. We look at the history books, at the shadows of the 20th century, and we tell ourselves a comforting lie. I would have been different. We imagine ourselves as the protectors, the resistors, the ones who would have stood firm against the tide of cruelty. But history is not a gallery of heroes. It is a graveyard of that very delusion. The truth is far more unsettling. That line between us and them is not a wall, but a fraying thread. Under the right pressure, in the right room, with the right person standing over you, that thread doesn't just stretch, it snaps. Today, we aren't here to discuss the obvious villains, the dictators, or the psychopaths. We are here to discuss you. We are here to dismantle the comfortable fantasy that your morality is an unshakable part of your soul. Instead, we are going to reveal the architecture of evil that lives within the ordinary human heart. In the 1960s, in a small laboratory at Yale, Stanley Milgram proved that your conscience has a price, and that price is remarkably low. He brought in ordinary people, teachers, engineers, laborers, and asked them to deliver electric shocks to a stranger in another room. They were told it was for a study on memory. As the learner began to scream, as they pounded on the wall claiming their heart was failing, the participants looked to the man in the lab coat. And the man in the lab coat gave a simple command. The experiment requires that you continue. Think about that for a moment. No one was holding a gun to their heads. There was no physical threat. And yet 2/3 of those people with families, people who considered themselves good, continued to press the button until they reached the lethal 450 volts. This happens because of a psychological phenomenon called agency shift. When you enter a hierarchy, you surrender your autonomy. You stop seeing yourself as a moral agent responsible for your actions and instead become a tool of the system. You hand over your soul to the authority figure, convincing yourself that your hands are clean because they aren't your hands anymore. They are just the instruments of an order. We tell ourselves we are just following orders to avoid the crushing, suffocating weight of knowing we chose to be executioners. In that lab, the architecture of evil wasn't built with bricks. It was built with a lab coat and a calm voice. If authority provides the command, the environment provides the mask. We saw this clearly in the darkness of a Stanford basement in 1971. When you put a uniform on a good man, when you hide his eyes behind mirrored sunglasses and give him a wooden baton, the human face disappears. This is the cold, calculated machinery of dehumanization. By stripping a human being of their name, and replacing it with a stitch number on a smock, you bypass the brain's empathy circuits entirely. In the Stanford prison experiment, we saw how quickly the guards began to treat the prisoners like vermin. They didn't do it because they were told to. They did it because the environment allowed it. The terrifying reality is that most people don't need to be coerced into cruelty. They just need a role to play and a victim who has been rendered invisible. When you stop seeing a person as a father, a son, or a human being, and start seeing them as a case, a number, or a problem, you have already built the cage. Dehumanization is the lubricant of atrocity. It makes the unthinkable feel like a technicality. You aren't inflicting pain on a person. You are simply recalibrating a piece of property. This shift is subtle, it is silent, and it is happening in the systems you inhabit every single day. But evil doesn't usually arrive with a scream or a grand manifesto. It arrives with a sigh. It starts with the small, quiet betrayals of your own values. It is the banality of evil. as Hannah Arendt described it. It's the moment you witness a colleague being bullied and you swallow your protest because you're afraid of the social cost. It's the harmless joke you laugh at to remain part of the group, even though it turns your stomach. This is the process of moral disengagement, the slow, rhythmic poisoning of your integrity. You tell yourself it isn't your business. You tell yourself that someone else will surely step in. You tell yourself that the victim probably deserved it, or that the system is simply too big to change. With every silent compromise, you are not just a bystander, you are an architect. You are meticulously building the slippery slope that will eventually carry you into the abyss. Each time you ignore your gut feeling, you are training your brain to be silent. You are cauterizing your own empathy. By the time the world asks you to do something truly horrific, you won't even realize you've crossed the line. You will have walked 1,000 small steps toward the darkness, and the final jump will feel like no jump at all. The most dangerous person on this earth is the one who believes they are incapable of darkness. We all carry what Carl Jung called the shadow, the repressed, violent, and selfish urges we pretend don't exist. We tuck them away behind polite smiles and professional resumes. But by denying your shadow, you give it total, unbridled control. When you believe you are purely good, you become the perfect vessel for atrocity, because you will justify any horror in the name of your own perceived righteousness. You will commit acts of cruelty while convinced you are a saint. To be truly moral, you must first acknowledge that you are a monster. You must sit in the dark and admit to yourself that under the right conditions, you could have been the guard. You could have been the betrayer. You could have been the one to flip the switch and walk away without looking back. This isn't about self-loathing, it's about self-awareness. Only when you recognize the beast within can you begin to chain it. Only when you know how the architecture of evil is built can you refuse to provide the labor. The world does not need more people who think they are heroes. It needs people who are terrified of their own capacity for evil. True resistance is not found in grand gestures, but in the heroic imagination, the cold, calculated decision to be the glitch in the machine. It is the person who breaks the silence when the room is deafeningly quiet. It is the individual who realizes that the line between good and evil isn't out there, in some far-off war zone or historical tragedy. It is cutting directly through their own heart, right now, in this moment. Every interaction you have is a choice. Every word you speak or withhold is a brick. You are either building a world where people are seen and protected, or you are upholding the architecture of cruelty. When the world eventually hands you the switch, and it will you have the strength to let go? Will you have the courage to be the bad person in a room of compliant, good people? Or will you prove the darkness right, and become just another silent brick in the wall of your own making? The choice isn't made once. It is made every day, in every silence, and in every shadow.